my talk today is about Wilfred Owen's last battle. I'd like to thank Special Collections and Maps colleagues for furnishing the maps concerning the battle, and also the books, which are from Wilfred Owen's personal book collection, which has got some very interesting dedications and shows a lot gives us an insight into the man himself, I think. Just to give you a little bit of a background on this talk, I helped Judith Priestman with the 2018 100th anniversary of his death exhibition, Wilfred Owen and the Pity of War. I helped to sort of check the military history elements for the captions and so on for that. And then this August, I actually revisited my little bit of research for a VIP visit for David Freeman, because the VIP was very interested in World War I. So I actually plunged back into Wilfred's sort of final few days, and I found out a tremendous amount about the battle that tragically ended with his death. It was an extraordinary battle, and I think the whole thing really is quite personal. World War I really is like usually looked at in terms of very big numbers. 60 million soldiers fought in World War I. 9 million of them unfortunately were killed. Is there anybody in here who's 25? Put your hand up if you're 25. Okay, that was the age, unfortunately, that Wilfred Owen was killed. It's also the average age of a soldier in World War I. The youngest soldier, allegedly, recorded who fought in World War I was a Serb who was 8 years old. The oldest British soldier was a gentleman called Frederick Robertson, who enlisted at the age of 71 in 1914. It's big numbers, World War I, but we have a situation with Wilfred Owen where we have an individual that we can isolate with a very personal thing, which is a book collection, and also the details of his death. So, it's worth just looking at the background of Wilfred Owen before we get into the battle. Wilfred was born in 1893. He was the oldest of 4 children. He was from quite an impoverished background. 2 of his siblings were affected by sort of childhood ailments, really resulting from malnutrition. His sister Mary never grew taller than 5 feet, and his brother Ron had rickets, which didn't actually prevent Ron from joining the RAF in 1918. And regardless of his poetry writing and his publishing, he had quite a difficult time. He failed to get into university, carried out various teaching jobs, and then when he joined the army, he went the route of a corps called the Artisans' Rifles, and he managed to get a commission in the Manchester Regiment in 1915. And there's a picture there of him as an officer cadet in the Artisan Rifle Corps, and then the later more sort of classic portrait of Wilfred as a rank of captain. So looking around some of these artifacts of his books, there's some interesting stuff over there. There's a book that actually belonged to his sister Mary, which had been given to her by her mother, which obviously ended up in Wilfred's possession. A book about flowers, which is rather nice. There's books from his mother, from his sister. There's an interesting book about Keats, with an interesting element, which is what MI5 would call wallet litter, which is like a clipping from a magazine or a journal, which is put into the book. Over here, this is a very interesting book. On his way back to the UK to join up in 1915, he'd been teaching in Bordeaux, and he passed through Paris. This book's very interesting. This guy, Laurent Taillefer, was an anarchist poet and writer, which Owen encountered, and he's got a signed copy of the guy's work, which I think is quite fascinating. Whether Wilfred knew about the chap's political past, I don't know. So we get to a point at the end of World War I. Wilfred Owen has been wounded. He's had shell shock and concussion. He's been at the Craig Lockhart Hospital where he's met other poets. But he's returned to the front. He's posted to the 2nd Battalion of the Manchester Regiment. He's won the Military Cross in October 1918 for gallantry, and there's dedications over there from the London Gazette. And then we reach this point where it's a point in the war where by October 1918, peace negotiations already sort of begun to develop because the Germans have effectively lost the war. The German army has started to mutiny, forming revolutionary soldiers' committees. The German Navy has mutinied, but the German army is still in place on the Western Front. At this point, the German High Command decided to prevaricate, thinking it could possibly get a better deal, maybe to make the war last till the spring. Now it's worth bearing in mind that during World War One, 6,000 soldiers died every day in World War One. Again, enormous numbers. So if the war had lasted to the spring, potentially that would have been another 90 days, which might have been another 600,000 soldiers. The Allies have been consistently pushing the Germans back since August of 1918, and so they decided to stage a battle, which was going to be the Battle of the Sambre. Where this left Wilfrid, on the 31st of October, when he wrote his last letter to his mother, which is printed off down there, is in the forester's house, which is just about there, with the Sambre Canal just in front of him. And the objective of his regiment, as part of the 32nd Division, was to cross this water barrier and capture a farm just about there. So basically to punch through, all the way through there. Now, extraordinarily, when I started reading about this battle, the plan, it's early November, and everybody's wearing a heavy woolen uniform, carrying full equipment. The plan was to cross the canal on improvised rafts built by the Royal Engineers, many of them made out of cork and empty petrol tins. That was the plan. Defending the other bank was, according to the War Office War Diary, Prussians, which is usually what the British Army referred to in World War I as quite motivated, tough German troops, and a tremendous amount of machine guns and artillery support. So the attack began at 6 o'clock with the Manchester Regiment trying to cross the river, the canal, on these improvised rafts, whatever boats and things that they've been able to gather together. Unfortunately, they weren't able to cross. Wilfrid was killed at about 6 o'clock in the morning, last seen encouraging his men to go forward. What actually happened then was the attack kind of reconfigured, and there is a town on this map called Oars, which is just there. And the Dorset Regiment, which was an adjacent regiment to the Manchesters, managed to cross the locks, just clamber across the locks. And Wilfred Owen's brigade stormed across the bridge that they'd be able to make, and they ended up achieving the objective. And it's an extraordinary battle when you think it's early November, it's 6 o'clock in the morning, it's probably dark, you're soaking wet, you're under machine gun fire, and they still managed to achieve their objective. 7 Victoria Crosses were won in this battle, with 4 within sight of each other, which is extraordinary. And at the end of the day, the 2nd Manchesters had captured 80 German prisoners. They'd unfortunately lost 22 men, and they'd captured 30 German machine guns, which is quite something, really. So Wilfred Owen's death is tragic, as all deaths are in war. It leaves a hole in everybody's life. You can see it in the dedications of the books from his sister and his mother. But interestingly, from an English sort of literature point of view, Wilfred Owen died at the end of the war. But from a military history point of view, he died ending the war, I think. Because a week later, the Germans just capitulated. There you go, that's my talk.